So this week, Justin prompted, and he kind of asked the question. He asked us to reflect. He asked three questions, and I'm going to focus on the reflection question. He asked us to reflect on a time when somebody else's experiences have changed or influenced your worldview. Uh, and first, I want to say that's a great question. It's a really complicated question to answer too. It, for me, it wasn't one experience. I've had multiple experiences, both positive and negative. And that's where it kind of comes into play. Like, for example, the most recent experience that I had that kind of altered the way I perceive the world around me um, was one of my residents had posted a sign on his door, and it was, if you don't agree with equality, I hate you, stay out. It was, if you don't believe in gay rights, stay out. It was just all um, very negatively toned, but I understood where he was going with, and I understood what he was trying to achieve. Um, and so I had to pull him into my office and talk to him for a couple of reasons. I mean, A, he was violating policy by having over 20% of the door covered. B, he was being counterproductive in a sense, using negative language to counteract negative language. It doesn't really work. And he was very, feeling really down about the whole situation. And he's not from around here. He's from Atlanta, which is a cultural hub, which is very much more accepting of Valdosta and very much more open minded. And so I was partially trying to get him to adjust to to living in Valdosta and this culture, and also trying to coach him into having to use more positive language and having positive impacts. So essentially, I talked to him about his experiences and what he's known and where he's from and his background and whatnot. And I feel it's really important to learn about people's upbringing and background to an extent to be able to kind of go through there. Um, and I mean, to an extent, the social justice, the theory after we learned about the racial identity theories last week, and I saw some traits and I was able to think about him when I was going through it. I mean, at the time I didn't know I was applying it or what I was applying, but I come from a more individualist approach than sociology approach where you do group. So I'm more about the person and specifically is with them. Uh, but I was able to coach him and guide him into speaking in a more positive manner, uh, which is not something I knew or like for me. To be honest, like social justice and talking about it in a way where I can feel comfortable is relatively new. I am very much more so comfortable with it than I was weeks ago, months ago. Since I've gotten here, I have essentially changed the way I perceive how to talk about it. I always used to think, well, I can't really contribute to the argument either or way directions without stepping on toes. And I have definitely stepped on my toes before trying to relate, and it's an awkward situation. And I think now that I'm not so much concerned whether or not I'm going to step on toes, as long as I can make those meaningful connections and being able to explain that to students. And this was one of those eye openers for me. Like he was struggling with stuff that I can't personally relate to, I can't personally align to, but I can empathize and sympathize and attempt to process what he's going through and try to put myself in his shoes the best I can. And I mean, it turned out to be really good. It made a really positive impact. I coached him into, instead of like putting up a board and saying I hate you, you can't come into my room, to being able to have positive conversations with other residents. Like, hey, this is why I think this, and having educational conversations with like, this is why I think that equality is good. Why are you so against it? Like, I mean, obviously not targeting them. Saying why you like, tell me more about why what you think about equality, and approaching it in a more positive way. In order to have educational conversations this way, instead of just pushing back and doing the same hate that the other side is doing. So I brought him to more of a middle ground. And again, this is not something I thought I could associate to or would have been able to do, and I don't think that I would have been able to do this just even a month or two ago. Like I've done situations similar to this, but in the way with the language I was using, with the way I was able to describe it, I am 1,000 times better than I used to be able how to like get through all this and how to help him and where to who to direct him to, who would be the most who would be the best person for him to speak to. So that was really an eye opener, helping for me, and it made me realize that it may not have to be a culture, uh, like a Middle Eastern culture, which I'm quite familiar with. It may not have to be a whole Middle Eastern culture, but you can also apply to subculture. And for example, a black bi teen living in Atlanta that has a whole mix. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of identities going on, a lot of development going on, and a lot of especially taking yourself out of a very multicultural hub, which is probably much more accepting than being in Valdosta, Georgia, which even I can see that is just. I mean, I coming from Eastern, one of the better schools for LGBTQ community and diversity. It's a very big eye opener here, and I've learned a lot from that too. But I'm going to focus on still on that on my resident. It it shows me that no matter what culture you assign from, you always got to remember. You always have to remember there are always subcultures that people are assigned to, and they may not prescribe to that overall overarching culture. They may assign to a subculture or the background they were brought up and influenced them. And listening to him about what was going on with that, with his situation and how he was trying to adapt and become more of this, more understanding and try to work with it. I kind of related to myself. Like I had a struggle when I came down here too with trying to understand how closed-minded things were and the lack of diversity training and the lack of diversity promotion. And I struggled with that stuff too when I got down here. But why it changed my worldview of things and how it shifted my thinking was that it took me from a position that was the tipping point for me. That took me from the position of not really talking about social justice, not really talking about LGBTQ and etc. Rights and social justices. It came more from me saying, well, that's not my battle. I don't know how to advocate for it. To having a wealth of knowledge that I've come to through this class, and this class has helped me. This program has helped me worlds. The people I've interacted with have helped me worlds. I've learned so much from quite a few people, especially some of the people in housing and what we've had our conversations were, and they've challenged me quite a bit. Stephanie Poggi, one of those, she's challenged me a lot, and I've learned a lot from her. And that's why I'm saying that you got to focus on those subcultures. While yes, your cultural upbringing, like for me, I grew up in a German Polish household, and I never considered myself to be a white person until I learned about being a white person. And I want to say it was like late elementary school. I learned about it when we were taking like this Michigan Educational Assessment Placement or whatever it is called, the MEAP, and I was like, well, I'm German Polish. Where can I check for that? And being a smart aleck kid that I was, and trust me, that's transgressed all the way through now. I didn't know. I thought I was a German Polish, Native American, and Irish descent, and I thought those were my ethnicities. I thought that's what I was. I didn't think I was white, and so now I guess the point of that was what I'm saying is I've reflected and changed and thought about a lot of things since then, and I've developed much more, and I feel more comfortable having these conversations. So, I mean, like I was saying, that resonant was my tipping point to realizing that I can speak on those things. I can help others. I may not be able to put myself in their shoes necessarily all the time, but I don't think you necessarily need to be able to help somebody figure out what they need to do. And that's kind of how I, shifted my perception of the overall culture and how a person has impacted me to better understand racial identity. And not just racial identity. I mean, we keep using racial identity, and that's fine and great. But I think it's what I keep hearing a trend is cultural identity. It's culture. Your race. There's many cultures that make up a race, and so it's more in depth than that. It's more culturally driven. I mean, Blackfoot Indian myself versus Cherokee, completely different ideologies, completely different lessons learned, completely different feelings. Um, and I mean that goes for a Black American growing up in Detroit or a Black American growing up in South Georgia. They're completely different upbringings, completely different struggles, completely different issues. Um, and that's one of the, I mean, not just an individual person, but me moving down here has changed my entire viewpoint on the world. Um, and I think what I really want to do to challenge myself further, and I know I'm going quite a bit over time, I'm sorry, but I also do hope this kind of answers the question and fits what you're looking for. But I also think that I want to travel outside the country because my experience with outside of the country is very limited. I've been to a tourist place like the Bahamas outside the country, but I think for me that's not the same. I really want to interact with people far and beyond different from here. And it's also what I do for my when I'm doing my Kuhai searching. I'm looking for places that are completely different from what I've been into to challenge me to change and show me different viewpoints. And so it's really important to me. Culture and learning about cultures are extremely important to me. And I think um, I could reflect on, like I said, I could reflect on this for a long time. There are a lot of different people who impacted me and a lot of different things that impacted me. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave it at that. The readings were very extensive, and they were very interesting. It was again, been this whole section has been a very big challenge for me in learning more and trying to figure out how I can relate it to myself and relate it to others around me, so I can kind of see it um, and try to get a better idea of it. But either way, I really enjoy this, and I cannot wait for our conversations because they are very interesting when we get to class. And I'm assuming that this is going to be even more interesting than the last class. So, see y'all in class.